Blood-soaked sand clung to Marcus's sandals as he limped through Rome's shadowed streets. The gash on his thigh throbbed with each step, festering beyond the arena physician's skill. Death circled him like vultures over the Colosseum floor. In the squalid Subura district, desperate whispers led him to a humble shop where a young woman mixed herbs by lamplight. Her hands moved with quiet confidence despite the threats carved into her door. When she looked up, her eyes held no fear of the gladiator before her, only assessment of his wound. "I need healing," Marcus said, voice rough from years of battle cries. "You need a guardian," he added, noting the broken lock. Could a man who dealt in death become a shield for one who preserved life? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Marcus Severus winced as the young healer unwrapped the soiled bandage from his thigh. The wound beneath was an angry red mouth, its edges blackened where the gladius had sliced through muscle. 8 years in the arena had taught him the difference between a clean wound and a poisoned one. This was decidedly the latter. "You should be dead," Livia said, not looking up. Her slender fingers probed the wound's edge with remarkable steadiness. 3 days with this infection? Most men would be delirious with fever. "Most men haven't survived what I have," Marcus replied, his accent still heavy with the forests of Germania despite his years in Rome. Livia turned to a weathered scroll laid carefully on her work table. The Greek letters were faded but precise, written in a hand more elegant than anything belonging to the Subura district. She traced a passage with her fingertip, nodding to herself. "Your arena physicians, they used wine and hot metal, yes?" Marcus grunted affirmation. The imperial physicians were butchers with credentials, good only for deciding which gladiators could fight again and which would feed the corpse collectors. Livia mixed powders from clay jars into a mortar, grinding with practiced precision. "This will burn worse than their iron, but it will draw out what they could not." "You're certain?" He'd come to her shop on whispers alone, the witch healer of the Subura who worked miracles for those the proper physicians wouldn't touch. "No," she admitted, meeting his eyes directly. "But you're already walking with death at your shoulder. What have you to lose?" Marcus studied her, younger than he'd expected, perhaps 25, with olive skin and dark curls tied back practically from her face. No mystical airs, no grand promises. Just steady hands and calm assessment. He'd seen enough showmen in Rome to value plain truth. "Do it." As she applied the poultice, Marcus's eyes fell on the small wooden amulet hanging at his belt. Blood had soaked into its carved runes, a protective charm from his homeland. A poor talisman, given his current state, yet he found himself clutching it as the medicine burned like fire through his leg. "Your name," he managed through gritted teeth. "You haven't given it." "Livia," she replied, securing the bandage. "And you are the Wolf of the North. All Rome knows Marcus Severus." "All Rome knows a fiction," he said, sweat beading on his forehead as the poultice worked. "They see what Tertius has made me." "You're Lanista?" Marcus nodded. "He'll notice my absence soon. I should have returned to the Ludus after the games." "Yet you came here instead." Livia wiped her hands on a cloth. "Why?" "Because I've seen too many gladiators die from wounds like this. Tertius would have me fight regardless. Better to seek alternatives." A crash outside startled them both. Through the small window, Marcus glimpsed a group of men accosting a fruit seller, appending his cart. The merchant handed over coins with shaking hands. "Protection payments," Livia explained, her voice flat. "They'll come here next. They always do." Marcus noted the fresh gouges in her door, the hastily repaired shutters. "This happens often?" "Often enough. The established physicians dislike competition. The local thugs dislike any business that won't pay. And the superstitious." She gestured to crude symbols scratched into her doorframe. "Well, they've decided I'm a witch." Marcus absorbed this. "And you have no one?" Livia's shoulders straightened. "I manage." "Barely," he observed. Then, the calculation forming, "How long before I can fight again?" "If the infection clears?" 2 weeks minimum. More likely 3. "And if I stayed here?" guarded your door while you treated me?" Livia's expression remained neutral, but her eyes betrayed her, a flicker of relief quickly suppressed. "You're in no condition to guard anything. I'm in better condition than most, even injured." He shifted his weight, testing. "I have nowhere else to go. Tertius believes gladiators are like dogs, run away once, and you'll never be trusted again. So I heal you and you. Keep trouble from your door. Until I'm well enough to return." Or until he decided what came after. For the first time in 8 years, Marcus found himself with choices, however limited. A shout from down the street made Livia flinch, the protection collectors moving closer. "We have an agreement then," she said, extending her hand in the Roman fashion. Marcus took it, surprised by the strength in her grip. "We do." Neither spoke what both were thinking. What would happen when the 3 weeks ended, when the wound healed and the bargain concluded? For now, it was enough to have a temporary solution to their immediate problems. A healer with protection. A wounded warrior with sanctuary. Outside, Rome continued its ruthless business, oblivious to the small pact made in a humble shop in its poorest district. A pact that would soon send ripples through the mighty empire. Dawn brought a thin, watery light to Livia's shop and the sound of approaching footsteps. Marcus, who had spent the night slumped against the wall beside the door, his gladius across his knees, opened his eyes immediately. The fever had broken sometime in the darkness, but his legs still throbbed with each heartbeat. "They're early today," Livia said, already awake and grinding herbs. Dark circles shadowed her eyes. Marcus rose stiffly, testing his weight on the injured leg. "How many usually?" "3. The leader is called Corvus. Missing an ear." She didn't look up from her work. "I don't have enough to pay them this week." "You won't need to." Marcus positioned himself beside the door, partially hidden by a hanging rack of dried herbs. When the pounding came, Livia opened the door as she always did. Corvus stood there, flanked by 2 men whose scarred knuckles and broken noses spoke of their profession. "Payment day, which," Corvus said, stepping inside without invitation. "Prices have gone up. 10 denarii. That's twice the usual amount," Livia protested, though she had prepared for this inevitability. "Complaints about witchcraft are expensive to manage." Corvus grinned, revealing several missing teeth. "Unless you'd prefer a visit from the—" The sight of Marcus emerging from behind the herb racks silenced him mid-sentence. Even injured, the gladiator was an imposing figure, his muscled frame hardened by years of combat, his face a map of old scars. "The wolf," one of Corvus's men whispered, taking a step back. "This shop is under my protection now," Marcus said simply, his gladius hanging casually at his side, not yet drawn but unmistakably present. "Find easier prey." Corvus's face contorted between fear and calculation. "This isn't the arena, gladiator. You're outnumbered." "So I often am." Marcus smiled thinly. "In the arena, they send 5 men against me for entertainment. Here, I see only 3, and not particularly impressive ones." "Tertius will hear about this," Corvus threatened, retreating toward the door. "Your Lanista won't be pleased his prized wolf is running loose." "Tell him," Marcus replied. "Tell everyone. The witch healer of Subura has a guardian now." After they departed, hurriedly but with muttered promises of return, Livia exhaled shakily. "That won't be the end of it." "No," Marcus agreed, lowering himself carefully back to the pallet she'd prepared for him. The brief confrontation had drained more of his strength than he cared to admit. "But it buys us time." Livia knelt beside him to check his wound. "The infection is still deep. I'll need to change the poultice." As she worked, her brow furrowed. "There's something strange here. This isn't responding as it should." "Meaning?" "I think," she paused, examining closer, "this wasn't just a dirty blade. There's something in the wound itself. A poison, perhaps." Marcus wasn't surprised. Matches were often enhanced for the crowd's entertainment. "Can you heal it?" "Yes, but it will take longer than I thought. Perhaps a month, not weeks." She looked at him directly. "Tertius won't wait that long." "No, he won't." Marcus grimaced as she applied a fresh poultice. The next games are in 20 days. I'm scheduled to fight. A heavy silence fell between them as the implications settled. If Marcus didn't return, Tertius would send men, not just thugs like Corvus, but trained fighters from the Ludus. If he did return before healing, the poison would ensure he never left the arena alive. Their temporary arrangement had just become much more complicated. A commotion outside drew their attention. Through the window, they saw a familiar figure approaching, a stocky man with a military bearing despite his advanced years. Gaius, Livia explained, relief evident in her voice. A friend. Former legionary. Gaius burst in without knocking, his weathered face grave. Trouble comes, Livia. Words all over the Subura that the wolf guards the witch now. He nodded respectfully to Marcus. I've seen you fight. Never thought I'd meet you here. What kind of trouble? Marcus asked. Tertius has posted a reward for information on your whereabouts. 10 aurei. A substantial sum, enough to tempt even decent men. And there's more, Gaius continued. Octavius the physician has petitioned the aediles about unauthorized healing practices. He's specifically named your shop. Livia paled. The aediles have ignored me for years. Gold changes priorities, Gaius said grimly. And Tertius has plenty to spare. Marcus and Livia exchanged glances, the weight of their new reality settling between them. What had begun as a simple trade, healing for protection, had escalated into something far more dangerous. We need a better plan, Marcus said finally. Outside, Rome continued its daily rhythms, indifferent to the small drama unfolding in the shop. But in the halls of power and the shadows of the Subura, forces were aligning against the gladiator and the healer, drawing them into a game with stakes higher than either had anticipated. Days melted together in Livia's small shop. Marcus established a routine despite his injury, checking entry points at dawn, watching the street through gaps in the shutters, and cleaning his gladius with meticulous care. Though still weak from the poison, he positioned himself visibly when patients arrived, a silent sentinel whose reputation alone deterred most trouble. What is this? He asked one evening, watching Livia prepare a complex mixture. For your wound. She added precise drops of a dark liquid to the mortar. An antidote of sorts. My grandmother's recipe from Alexandria. Your grandmother taught you healing? Livia nodded, her hands never pausing in their work. She raised me after my parents died in the fever that swept through Rome when I was 8. She was Greek, brought to Rome as a physician for a senator's household. And you? Were you also a household physician? A shadow crossed her face. No. When she died, her patron's wife accused her of poisoning the senator, though he simply died of old age. I was turned out. I was 15. Marcus absorbed this. So you came here, to the Subura. It was all I could afford. She applied the fresh poultice to his wound. And these people need healing as much as any senator. The mixture burned differently this time, a deep, penetrating heat rather than the surface fire of previous applications. Marcus breathed through the pain, focusing on Livia's careful movements. You're good at this, he observed. Better than the physicians who attend the gladiators. Those men learn from books and lectures. I learned from treating actual people. She secured the bandage. The poor make excellent teachers. They come with every ailment imaginable. A comfortable silence fell between them. Marcus found himself studying her face, the intelligence in her dark eyes, the small scar near her temple, the determined set of her mouth. Not a conventional beauty by Roman standards, but striking in her quiet competence. Tell me about the arena, she said suddenly, washing her hands in a basin. Is it as they say? Marcus stiffened. Few asked him directly about his life as a gladiator. Most either romanticized it or avoided the subject entirely. Depends on what they say, he replied carefully. They say you've never lost a match. That you've killed 30 men. 28, he corrected. And I've lost twice. Early on. What happened? I learned. The memories surfaced, the training master's whip, the burning humiliation, the nights spent drilling sword forms until his arms gave out. Losing isn't permitted twice. And before? In Germania? Marcus rarely spoke of his homeland, but something in Livia's direct gaze drew the words from him. I was a warrior there too, but different. We fought for our people, our lands. Not for entertainment. How were you captured? Roman expansion. The simplest explanation for the destruction of his village, the death of his family, the chains that brought him to this empire. I was wounded in battle, taken alive. A mistaken judgment. And now you're here, Livia said softly, protecting a shop instead of fighting in the arena. A temporary arrangement, he reminded her, though the words felt hollow. A knock at the door interrupted them. Marcus reached for his gladius, but Livia gestured for him to wait. It's Helena, she explained, moving to open the door. The woman who entered was clearly patrician, expensive stola, hair arranged elaborately, attended by a slave who remained outside. Yet she moved with the easy familiarity of a regular visitor. Livia, I came as soon as Helena stopped at the sight of Marcus. Oh, the rumors are true then. Helena is a patron, Livia explained to Marcus. She supports my work. And tries to keep her out of trouble, Helena added, recovering her composure. Which has become considerably more difficult since you've taken residence, gladiator. You know me. My husband never misses the games. The wolf of the north is quite recognizable. Helena turned to Livia. Tertius is furious. He's telling everyone his prized fighter has been bewitched. Convenient explanation, Marcus muttered. It's also dangerous, Helena continued. Octavius is using it to strengthen his case against Livia. He's always resented her success with patients he couldn't help. Can you intervene? Livia asked. Helena sighed. I've delayed the aediles for now. But this situation cannot continue indefinitely. She glanced meaningfully at Marcus, especially with the games approaching. After Helena departed, a heavy silence descended on the shop. The approaching games hung over them like an executioner's blade. 20 days, now 17, until Marcus was expected in the arena. We'll find a way, Livia said finally, though uncertainty threaded her voice. Marcus nodded, not trusting himself to speak. For the first time in years, he had found something resembling peace in this small shop with this unusual healer. The thought of returning to the sand of the arena, to the roar of the crowd demanding blood, filled him with a weariness that surprised him. He had been resigned to his fate for so long. When had that changed? The next morning brought an unexpected visitor. Marcus recognized him immediately, a gladiator from the same ludus, Drusus, whose scarred face and missing fingers marked him as a veteran of many games. They said the wolf had found a new den, Drusus remarked, eyeing the modest shop. Didn't believe it until now. Marcus's hand moved to his gladius, but Drusus raised his palms. I'm not here for Tertius. The old bastard doesn't know I've come. Why are you here then? To warn you. Drusus lowered his voice. Tertius has hired men from the docks to bring you back. Not for the games, he says you're damaged goods now. He plans to make an example of you. A chill settled in Marcus's gut. When? 3 days, maybe 4. He's gathering enough men to ensure success. Drusus glanced at Livia, who stood silently by her workbench. Is she worth it, brother? This healer? Marcus didn't answer directly. You risked much coming here. We shared blood on the sand. Drusus touched the scar on his neck, a wound Marcus had helped cauterize after a particularly brutal match. That means something even if nothing else does in this cursed city. After Drusus departed, Livia approached Marcus, her expression troubled. You should leave. Find passage on a ship, get far from Rome. And go where? Marcus lifted the wooden amulet hanging at his belt, his last connection to Germania. My homeland is under Roman control. I have no family left. Better than waiting for Tertius's men to drag you back for execution. And what of you? Marcus challenged. Without protection, how long before Corvus returns? Or Octavius convinces the aediles to arrest you? Livia had no answer for this. They both understood the precariousness of their position, each providing what the other desperately needed, yet their arrangement drawing dangers neither could face alone. That night, fever gripped Marcus again. The poison in his wound flared, bringing delirious dreams of the arena, of blood-soaked sand and the crowd's roar. He thrashed on his pallet, reliving old battles and imagined horrors. Through the haze of fever, he felt cool hands on his brow, heard Livia's steady voice guiding him back from the brink. She spoke softly in Greek, prayers or incantations he couldn't tell, while applying fresh poultices to draw out the poison. By dawn, the fever broke. Marcus awoke to find Livia asleep beside his pallet, her hand still resting on his arm. The intimacy of the moment struck him. This woman who had fought through the night to save him, a gladiator she barely knew. When she woke, their eyes met in silent acknowledgement of something changed between them. "Thank you," he said simply. She nodded, rising to prepare for the day's patience. "The poison is stronger than I thought. It's designed to weaken slowly, to ensure a spectacular death in the arena." "Tertius's work?" "Possibly. Or perhaps your opponent's weapon was treated." She handed him a cup of herbal tea. "Either way, complete healing will take longer than we have." The broken slave collar Marcus kept among his few possessions seemed to mock him from across the room. Though technically a freed gladiator, having earned the wooden rudis after 5 years of victories, Tertius had convinced him to remain under contract. Freedom in name only. Livia's first patient arrived early, a woman with a sickly infant. Marcus watched as she examined the child with gentle efficiency, mixing a remedy while explaining its preparation to the grateful mother. "Come back tomorrow," Livia instructed, refusing the few copper coins offered. "Let me see how he responds." After the woman left, Marcus raised an eyebrow. "You didn't take payment." "She has nothing to spare." Livia shrugged. "Some can pay, some cannot. It balances." "Is that why Corvus's demands were so difficult to meet?" Livia busied herself with cleaning her workspace. "The neighborhood has been struggling since the grain shipments were delayed. Many families can barely feed themselves, let alone pay for medicine." Marcus contemplated this different understanding of value, so at odds with the arena, where everything had a price, where a man's worth was measured in sesterces and the bets he could draw. Throughout the day, more patients arrived. Word had spread about the gladiator guardian, and people came who had previously been too frightened of Corvus's men. Many brought small gifts instead of coins, fresh bread, a handful of olives, a carefully mended tunic for Marcus. "They're grateful," Livia explained, seeing his confusion at the offerings. "You've made them feel safe." "Temporarily," Marcus reminded her, though the genuine appreciation stirred something long dormant within him. In the arena, adulation came from bloodshed. Here, it came from protection, a subtle distinction that felt significant. That evening, a small boy arrived with a message scratched on a pottery shard. "Octavius visits the magistrate tomorrow. The which will be discussed." Gaius appeared shortly after, confirming the warning. "Octavius claims to have evidence of harmful foreign practices." The old legionary's face was grim. "He's determined to shut you down, Livia." "And Tertius's men approach," Marcus added, sharing Drusus's warning. Gaius looked between them. "You need more than just one injured gladiator, no matter how fearsome." "What do you suggest?" Livia asked. "I know men, veterans like me, who owe you for treating their old wounds. We can organize a watch." As Gaius outlined his plan, Marcus felt an unfamiliar emotion taking root. Hope, perhaps. Or something dangerously close to it. Gaius's veterans proved as good as their word. By the following evening, a rotation had been established, weathered men with the disciplined bearing of former legionaries taking turns watching the approaches to Livia's shop. Their presence was subtle but effective, a silent message to Corvus and his ilk that the healer now had more than one protector. Most served on the eastern frontier, Gaius explained as he introduced them to Marcus. "They've seen what healers like Livia can do. Worth more than a cohort of army physicians, they'll tell you." One man, Titus, missing an arm below the elbow, nodded solemnly. "My stump was rotting. Army physician wanted to take more. The healers saved what remained." Marcus recognized the look in their eyes. Men who had seen death and suffering, who valued practical skills over credentials or social standing. In another life, they might have been his brothers-in-arms rather than spectators at the games where he fought. As the veterans established their watch, Marcus focused on reinforcing the shop itself. Though still weakened by the poison, he worked methodically, repairing shutters, strengthening the door, creating sight lines that would advantage defenders. Livia watched him secure a heavy beam across the back entrance. "You've done this before." "My people were raiders and defenders both," he replied, testing the beam's strength. "We knew how to protect what was ours." "Is that how you see this shop now? As yours to defend?" Marcus paused, considering. "I gave my word. That's enough." But they both knew something more had developed, an attachment beyond their initial bargain. It showed in small moments, Livia preparing extra food for his larger appetite, Marcus whittling a new pestle to replace her cracked one, their conversations stretching later into the evening. On the 5th day of the veteran's watch, Octavius finally made his appearance. He arrived with 2 public slaves and a minor official, his expensive toga and haughty expression marking him as a man accustomed to deference. "I am here on official business," he announced when Livia opened the door. His eyes widened slightly at the sight of Marcus standing behind her, but he quickly recovered. "The practice of unauthorized medicine must be investigated." "My practice is legitimate," Livia replied calmly. "I make no claims to be a physician. I simply provide herbal remedies." "Remedies that interfere with proper medical treatment," Octavius countered. "I have testimonies from citizens who sought proper help too late because of your interventions." "Names," Marcus demanded, his voice carrying the authority that commanded attention in the arena. "Provide these witnesses." The official shifted uncomfortably. "The accusers prefer to remain anonymous for now." "Convenient," Marcus observed. Octavius's face reddened. "The gladiator speaks as if he has authority here. Tell me, slave, does Tertius know where his property has strayed?" The insult hung in the air. Marcus's hand moved toward his gladius, but Livia touched his arm, a gentle restraint. "I have committed no crime," she said firmly. "Unless you have a specific charge and evidence to support it, you have no right to disrupt my business." From the side street, 3 of Gaius's veterans emerged, their scarred faces and military bearing unmistakable. They made no threats, offered no words, simply stood watching with the patient menace of men who had faced far worse than an officious physician. The official cleared his throat. "Perhaps we should continue this investigation through proper channels, Octavius. The Aediles will want a formal report." Frustration flashed across Octavius's face, but he nodded stiffly. "This isn't finished," he warned Livia. To Marcus, he added, "and if Tertius has plans for runaways, especially valuable ones." After they departed, Livia released a shaky breath. "That won't be the last we see of him." "No," Marcus agreed. "But he'll be more cautious next time." Later that evening, as Livia checked his wound, Marcus noticed a small clay votive figure placed near her workbench, a crude representation of a healing goddess, recently made by the look of it. "A gift from the baker's daughter," Livia explained, following his gaze. "For curing her cough. The neighborhood supports you." "Some do. Others still believe I practice witchcraft." She applied a fresh poultice to his wound, which was finally showing signs of true healing. "But having you here has changed things. People feel safer coming to me now." A comfortable silence fell between them as she worked. The shop smelled of herbs and clean bandages, so different from the sweat and blood of the ludus. "What will you do?" Livia asked suddenly. "When you're fully healed." The question had haunted Marcus for days. "Tertius won't simply let me go. The investment is too great. You could leave Rome. Start anew elsewhere." "And you? What of the threats against you?" Livia's hands stilled on his bandage. "I've managed before." "Barely," he echoed her own words from days earlier. Their eyes met, and something unspoken passed between them, an acknowledgement that their fates had become entwined beyond their initial arrangement. The gladiator and the healer, both outcasts in their own way, both finding in the other something long missing. "We have time yet," Marcus said finally. The wound still needs healing. But they both knew time was running short. 12 days remained until the games, and Tertius's patience would not last even that long. Sooner or later, they would be forced to make decisions that would alter both their lives irrevocably. For now, though, there was this quiet moment in a small shop in the Subura, where for perhaps the first time since being brought to Rome in chains, Marcus felt something like peace. As Marcus's strength gradually returned, he began making cautious circuits of the neighborhood. No longer confined to Livia's shop, he established a visible presence in the Subura, a silent deterrent that kept Corvus and his men at a distance. The locals watched him with a mixture of awe and wariness, the fearsome gladiator now walking among them like an ordinary man. During quiet afternoons, Livia attempted to teach him the rudiments of reading Latin. Marcus had never needed letters in the arena, but he applied himself with the same discipline he brought to combat training. This one means healing, Livia explained, pointing to characters in one of her medical texts. And this indicates the proper preparation. Marcus traced the marks awkwardly, his sword-calloused fingers more accustomed to weapons than writing implements. In my homeland, only the priests kept records. Warriors had no use for such things. And now? He looked up, meeting her eyes. Now I see the value. During one of these lessons, Marcus began whittling a small piece of wood, his hands needing occupation while his mind worked through the unfamiliar concepts. By the end of the afternoon, a rough wolf had emerged from the wood, fierce but protective, its form simple but unmistakable. He placed it on Livia's workbench without comment. She picked it up, examined it with careful fingers, and set it prominently near her herbs. Neither spoke of it, but the carving remained there, a silent sentinel over her work. 9 days before the games, Helena arrived with troubling news. Octavius has gained the ear of Senator Claudius Albinus, she reported, her patrician composure slipping slightly. He claims foreign healing practices are undermining public health and proper Roman medicine. Albinus holds sway with the aediles, Livia said, her face paling. Worse, Helena continued, I've heard Tertius and Octavius were seen dining together at the senator's house. They're coordinating their efforts. Marcus absorbed this with growing concern. Tertius doesn't care about healing practices. He wants me back. And you're more valuable to him as an example than as a fighter now, Helena agreed. While Octavius wants Livia's practice shut down because she succeeds where he fails. That evening, after Helena's departure, a strained silence filled the shop. Livia worked methodically, preparing remedies for the next day's patients, while Marcus cleaned his gladius, a ritual that had always centered his thoughts before combat. I could speak to Tertius, he finally said. Offer to return for the games in exchange for leaving you unmolested. Livia's hand stilled. With that wound and the remaining poison? It would be suicide. Better than waiting for him to send men to drag me back and destroy your shop in the process. I won't trade your life for my safety. The vehemence in her voice surprised them both. Marcus set his sword aside and approached her workbench. This was always temporary, Livia. We both knew that. Did we? She looked up at him, her dark eyes challenging. Is that still what you believe? The question hung between them, demanding a truth neither had fully acknowledged. Marcus had come to her as a wounded gladiator seeking healing, nothing more. Yet somewhere in these days of shared dangers and quiet evenings, something fundamental had shifted. No, he admitted finally. Not anymore. The confession changed something in the air between them. Livia reached up, her fingertips lightly tracing the scar that ran from his temple to his jaw, a mark from his first arena battle, delivered by a Thracian fighter long dead. We'll find another way, she said softly. When her hand began to withdraw, Marcus caught it gently in his own. The gesture was tentative, unfamiliar, so different from the decisive movements that had kept him alive in the arena. This was uncharted territory for a man who had known only violence and spectacle for 8 years. Livia stepped closer, eliminating the space between them. When their lips met, it was with the relief of reaching a destination long sought but never expected. Later that night, as Livia slept curled against him on the narrow pallet, Marcus remained awake, his warrior's instincts alert to every sound in the darkened shop. The kiss had crossed a boundary neither could retreat from, transforming their arrangement into something far more complicated and far more precious. Morning brought an unexpected visitor. Drusus arrived as the first light filtered through the shutters, his expression grim. Tertius has hired 6 men from Capua, he reported without preamble. Former gladiators, not street thugs. They arrive tomorrow. How many days until the games? Marcus asked, though he already knew. 8, Drusus confirmed. But Tertius won't wait. The men have orders to bring you back alive, but... He glanced at Livia. They've been told to make an example of anyone who harbored you. The implications were clear. Tertius had escalated beyond reclaiming property. He was now determined to destroy anyone who had defied him. Thank you, brother, Marcus said, clasping Drusus's forearm in the gladiator's grip. After Drusus departed, Livia turned to Marcus, her face resolute rather than fearful. We need to visit the Ludus. What? Not it. I'll speak with Tertius directly. He's not a man who negotiates, Marcus warned. Especially with women. I'm not going to negotiate. Livia's eyes held a determination he'd come to recognize. I'm going to offer him something he wants more than revenge. As she outlined her plan, Marcus felt a reluctant admiration. The quiet healer had developed a strategy as calculating as any Lannistus. Whether it would save them remained to be seen, but one thing was certain. They were now fighting this battle together. Livia's plan required careful timing. While Marcus remained hidden with Gaius, she would approach Tertius with an offer, rare Eastern medicines that could enhance gladiator performance and recovery, knowledge she'd trade for Marcus's contractual freedom. It was a gamble, but Tertius's greed was well known. The prospect of fighters who healed faster and fought longer might outweigh his desire for vengeance. I should go with you, Marcus insisted as they prepared. He'd have you seized immediately, Livia countered. I'll bring Helena for protection. A patrician's presence will force certain courtesies. And if he refuses? Livia's expression hardened. Then we implement the second plan. The second plan was more desperate, gathering what they could carry and fleeing Rome entirely. Gaius had connections with merchant caravans heading east. It would mean abandoning everything they'd built, but at least they would have their lives and freedom. As dawn approached, Livia prepared to depart for her meeting with Tertius. She wore her finest tunic, still modest by Roman standards, and carried a small bundle of exotic herbs as proof of her claims. Be careful, Marcus said, taking her hands in his. Tertius sees every interaction as combat. Show no weakness. I've dealt with difficult men before, she replied with a faint smile. The Subura teaches its own lessons in survival. Their farewell was brief but intense, both aware of what was at stake. As Livia departed with Helena, Marcus forced himself to remain behind, every instinct rebelling against letting her face danger without him. The day stretched endlessly. Marcus paced Gaius's small room, checking the street through narrow shutters, imagining every possible outcome of Livia's meeting. By midday, his patience had frayed completely. I'm going to the Ludus, he announced. Gaius blocked the door. That's exactly what she didn't want you to do. Something's wrong. She should have returned by now. Helena would have sent word if... A pounding at the door interrupted them. Marcus drew his gladius, motioning Gaius aside. But instead of Tertius's men, it was a street boy from the Subura, breathless and wide-eyed. The healer sent me, he gasped. She says to tell you, the wolf must run. Their emergency signal. Something had gone catastrophically wrong. What happened? Marcus demanded. They took her. Men with a document, said she practiced magic. And the fancy lady was called away before it happened, some messenger about her husband. Magic charges. Not Tertius then, Octavius had made his move. The separation from Helena had been deliberately orchestrated, leaving Livia vulnerable. Where did they take her? The carcer, the boy replied, naming Rome's notorious prison near the Forum. Marcus felt the blood drain from his face. The carcer was no place for anyone, let alone a woman accused of magic. Few emerged from its cells alive, especially those without powerful advocates. I need to find Helena, he decided. She has the influence to intervene. There's more, the boy added. Men came to the healer's shop after. Broke everything. Said it was orders from the Lanista. So Tertius had struck simultaneously. A coordinated attack from both enemies. Marcus handed the boy a coin. Find Drusus at the Ludus. Tell him the wolf needs to know Tertius's movements. As the boy ran off, Gaius shook his head grimly. This is worse than we feared. If they're working together. They're not, Marcus realized suddenly. Octavius wouldn't risk his reputation by allying publicly with a Lanista. And Tertius wouldn't share glory with a physician. They're working in parallel, not concert. Does it matter? The result is the same. It matters for how we respond. Marcus began gathering his few possessions. I need to get to Helena's villa. Can you find where they're keeping Livia in the carcer? Before Gaius could answer, the door burst open. Marcus raised his gladius, but froze at the sight of 4 Praetorian guards, their short swords already drawn. Marcus Severus, the lead guard announced. By order of Tertius Gallus and the authority of Senator Claudius Albinus, you are to be returned to your rightful master. Marcus assessed his options in an instant. The room was too small for effective combat against 4 trained soldiers. Gaius was too old to fight, and resistance would only worsen his position. On what charge? He asked, playing for time. Destruction of property. Breach of contract. The guard's smile was cold, and suspected collaboration with a practitioner of harmful foreign magic. So the coordination between Tertius and Octavius was more formal than he'd realized. They had managed to align their interests with official sanction. Come quietly and you'll fight in the games as scheduled, the guard continued. Resist and join the witch for public execution after. The mention of Livia decided him. Marcus lowered his weapon and allowed the guards to bind his wrists. As they led him through the streets toward the Ludus, his mind raced through possibilities. Livia was in the carcer, he was returning to Tertius's control, and their allies had been neatly neutralized or separated. The carefully constructed life they had begun building together had collapsed in a single morning. But Marcus had survived the arena through strategy as much as strength. And Livia had survived the Subura through wit as much as skill. If they were to have any chance now, he would need to think like the Wolf of the North once more, calculating, patient, and lethal when the moment came. The guards delivered him not to the gladiator quarters but to Tertius's private office within the Ludus. The Lanista sat behind his desk, expression smug as Marcus was forced to his knees before him. The mighty wolf, Tertius observed, brought to heel at last. Tertius circled Marcus slowly, examining him as one might inspect damaged goods. You cost me a fortune in lost wagers when you disappeared. Not to mention the reputation damage, my prime fighter, vanishing like a thief in the night. I was dying from a poisoned wound, Marcus replied flatly. Your physician offered no real treatment. Tertius's hand lashed out, striking Marcus across the face. Yet here you stand, healed by the witch. Interesting, isn't it? He leaned closer. Do you know what's more interesting? The wound wasn't healing naturally, because it wasn't meant to. Understanding dawned on Marcus with sickening clarity. You had the blade poisoned. A slow-acting toxin from the east. Quite expensive. Tertius smiled thinly. Insurance, you might call it. I've noticed your enthusiasm waning, Wolf. The crowd still cheer, but your kills lack passion. You arranged my death for entertainment. I arranged a spectacular finale for Rome's greatest gladiator. The poison would have activated fully during your next match. A glorious death on the sand instead of a pathetic decline. Tertius shrugged. The witch ruined that plan. But perhaps it's worked out better this way. How so? Because now I have both the witch's secrets and my fighter back. Tertius returned to his desk, lifting a tablet. Your next opponent is already scheduled. Titus Galba, I believe you know him? Marcus felt his blood run cold. Titus Galba had been his closest friend in the Ludus years ago, until a misunderstanding engineered by Tertius had convinced Titus that Marcus had betrayed him. They hadn't fought in the same arena since. He's requested this match specifically, Tertius continued, savoring Marcus's reaction. He's been fighting in Capua, building quite a reputation. They call him the Avenger now. Where is Livia? Marcus demanded, refusing to be baited. The witch? Awaiting trial for practicing magic, corrupting a valuable gladiator, and… Tertius smiled cruelly, poisoning several patients who died under her care. That's a lie. Of course it is. But Octavius found several convenient witnesses. Amazing how testimony appears when sufficient coin is offered. Tertius leaned forward. Her trial is scheduled for the day after the games. Quite fortunate timing, you can watch her execution after your own match. Assuming you survive, of course. 2 guards entered without knocking. Senator Albinus has arrived, one announced. Tertius straightened. Perfect. Bring our fighter to the training yard. The senator wishes to see the wolf prepared for his triumphant return. As Marcus was hauled to his feet, Tertius added casually, "Oh, and the witch sent a message for you. She said to tell you that the collar was never broken." Cryptic nonsense. The carcer does that to people, brings on delirium. But Marcus understood immediately. Livia was referring to his broken slave collar, the symbol of his technical freedom that had never translated to actual liberty. She was telling him something important. Appearances could be deceiving. In the training yard, Marcus found himself surrounded by familiar faces, fellow gladiators who regarded him with a mixture of wariness and respect. Among them stood Titus Galba, powerfully built and scarred from years in the arena. Their eyes met across the yard, and Marcus saw nothing but cold hatred in his former friend's gaze. Senator Albinus arrived with an entourage that included, to Marcus's surprise, Octavius. The physician looked smugly triumphant, clearly enjoying his alignment with power. "So this is the famous wolf," Albinus remarked, examining Marcus like a curiosity. "Tertius tells me you've been bewitched by some herbalist woman." "I was dying from a poisoned wound," Marcus replied evenly. "She healed me." With forbidden Eastern practices, Octavius interjected. "Corrupting proper medicine with foreign superstitions." "Strange," Marcus countered, "that these superstitions succeeded where your Roman methods failed." Albinus laughed, genuinely amused. "He has spirit, this one. I see why the crowds favor him." To Tertius, ensure he's properly prepared for the games. The emperor himself may attend this match. As the senator moved away to discuss arrangements with Tertius, Octavius lingered. "Your healer is quite resilient," he said quietly. "Even in the carcer, she refuses to surrender her formulas to me. What do you want with her knowledge? You've discredited her already." Octavius's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Knowledge is power, gladiator. Her Eastern remedies, properly documented and presented as my discoveries, could bring considerable prestige and profit. You'd steal her work after destroying her reputation. I prefer to think of it as preserving valuable techniques while removing an unqualified practitioner." He leaned closer. "She'll break eventually. They all do in the carcer." As Octavius walked away, Marcus caught sight of Drusus among the gladiators. The veteran fighter gave him an almost imperceptible nod, a signal that Marcus interpreted immediately. Drusus had received his message and was acting as his eyes and ears. Guards led Marcus to the gladiator cells, not his former private quarters, but the secure area for fighters considered flight risks. As the door clanged shut, Marcus took stock of his situation. He was back under Tertius's control, scheduled to fight Titus in 7 days. Livia languished in the carcer, facing false charges and execution. Yet something else troubled him, a detail that didn't fit. Why would Tertius poison his most valuable fighter? The Lanista was ruthless but practical. Deliberately destroying a lucrative asset went against everything Marcus knew about the man. Unless Tertius had already placed massive bets against him. Unless the entire spectacle, his death in the arena, was meant to be the Lanista's greatest profit yet. The pieces began to align in Marcus's mind, forming a picture more sinister than he had imagined. This wasn't just about punishment for running away. It was about creating the perfect conditions for the wolf's final, most profitable fall. The carcer reeked of human misery, unwashed bodies, waste, and the distinctive smell of despair. Livia sat in her damp cell, back pressed against cold stone, focusing on her breathing as her grandmother had taught her. Panic would serve no purpose here. 2 days had passed since her arrest. They had separated her from the male prisoners but offered no other concessions to her gender. The guards largely ignored her except during the daily interrogations, when Octavius would arrive with his questions about her medicines. "Your situation worsens by the day," Octavius informed her during his latest visit. "New witnesses have come forward claiming illness after your treatments." "False witnesses," Livia replied, her voice hoarse from thirst. "As you well know, the truth is irrelevant. Only testimony matters." He set a clay cup of water just within her reach. "Your formulas, particularly the poison antidote you used on the gladiator, share them, and perhaps I can arrange more comfortable accommodations." Livia took the water but offered nothing in return. Her knowledge was her only leverage, and she wouldn't surrender it, especially not to the man who had orchestrated her downfall. "Your stubbornness is pointless," Octavius continued. "The gladiator has returned to Tertius. He'll die in the upcoming games. Tertius has arranged it all. You have no one left to protect you." The news of Marcus's capture struck her like a physical blow, but Livia maintained her composure. She couldn't afford to show weakness, not here. "Think on it," Octavius said as he departed. "Your trial approaches quickly, and the outcome is predetermined unless you cooperate." After he left, Livia closed her eyes, gathering her thoughts. If Marcus was back in Tertius's control, their situation was dire but not hopeless. Gaius would still be working to help them. And Helena, once she realized what had happened, would use her considerable influence. The real question was whether any help could arrive in time. A soft scraping sound drew her attention to the small window near the ceiling of her cell, too high and narrow for escape, but large enough for a whispered conversation. A familiar voice called down quietly. "Healer? Are you there?" "Drusus?" Livia stood, hope flaring for the first time in days. "Listen carefully. I have little time." The gladiator's voice was barely audible. "Marcus is being prepared to fight Titus Galba. Tertius has placed enormous bets against him and arranged for the blade to be poisoned again. Can you get a message to Helena? She might. Already done. The patrician woman is working through her husband's connections, but the charges against you come from high places. It won't be simple. And Marcus? He's training, biding his time. He told me to give you this." Something small dropped through the window, landing softly on the straw. "I must go before the guards return." After Drusus departed, Livia retrieved the object, a tiny vial, carefully wrapped in cloth. Inside was a familiar mixture, her own concentrated medicine, the same she had prepared for emergencies. Marcus had somehow kept it hidden during his capture, and now returned it to her through Drusus. The gesture brought tears to her eyes. Even separated and in danger, he was still acting as her guardian. Livia tucked the vial into a hidden fold of her tunic. The dose was small but potent, enough to counteract poison or induce a deep sleep depending on how it was administered. A powerful tool in the right moment. She settled back against the wall, mind working through possibilities. If Helena couldn't secure her release before the trial, and if Marcus was forced to fight in the games, they would need to create their own opportunity. For the first time since her arrest, Livia felt the stirrings of a plan. In the ludus, Marcus trained with mechanical precision, his body remembering the rhythms of combat even as his mind focused elsewhere. Tertius kept him under constant guard, but the Lanista couldn't prevent the small exchanges of information that flowed through the gladiator brotherhood. Drusus approached during spear practice, positioning himself nearby. "It's done," he murmured, loud enough only for Marcus. "The healer has what you sent." Marcus nodded almost imperceptibly. "And Helena?" "Working through the Senate, but slowly. Octavius has powerful friends." "What of Titus?" Drusus glanced across the training yard where the powerful gladiator was practicing killing blows on a wooden post. He still believes the lie Tertius told him years ago, that you revealed his escape plan in exchange for better quarters. I need to speak with him. Impossible. Tertius keeps you separated intentionally. Find a way, Marcus insisted. Everything depends on it. As Drusus moved away, Marcus returned to his training, aware of Tertius watching from the balcony above. The lanista rarely took such personal interest in preparation, but these were not ordinary games. Tertius had staked everything on Marcus's defeat. That evening, a new development, guards delivered Marcus to the private baths normally reserved for Tertius and his honored guests. The lanista himself waited there, along with Octavius and, surprisingly, Senator Albinus. The wolf should look his best for the games, Tertius explained, gesturing for Marcus to enter the steaming water. The emperor has confirmed his attendance. This will be an historic match. Marcus complied, acutely aware of his vulnerability without weapons or armor. The three men observed him with the detached interest of investors examining property. Your opponent trains impressively, Albinus remarked. I watched him this morning. They say his skill with the trident is unmatched in Capua. The wolf fights with sword and shield, Tertius interjected. A more traditional combat. Then it shall be a clash of styles, the senator replied. How fascinating. Octavius stepped closer to the bath's edge. I examined him upon his return. The witch's treatment was remarkably effective. The poison is completely neutralized. A shame, Tertius said, not bothering to hide his meaning. Still, there are other ways to ensure an entertaining spectacle. The implication was clear. If poison wouldn't guarantee Marcus's defeat, Tertius would find other methods. Rigged equipment, perhaps, or bribing the referee to allow illegal moves from Titus. The witch continues to resist questioning, Octavius added, changing subjects. Extraordinary stubbornness for a woman in her position. Perhaps she needs proper motivation, Albinus suggested. Bring her to the games. Let her witness her protector's fall before her own trial. Tertius smiled coldly. An excellent suggestion, Senator. The contrast should break her spirit quite effectively. As the men continued discussing arrangements, Marcus focused on controlling his expression. The news that Livia would be brought to the games was both terrible and potentially useful. If she would be present in the Colosseum, it created possibilities, dangerous ones, but possibilities nonetheless. 5 days remained until the games. 5 days to communicate with Titus, coordinate with their allies, and prepare for what might be their only chance at freedom. As Marcus was led back to his cell, a small object pressed into his palm by a passing slave, Helena's golden pin, a token confirming she was working on their behalf. The simple object carried an enormous message. They were not alone in this fight. 3 days before the games, Gaius made his move. The old legionary appeared at the Ludus gate dressed in the uniform of a minor official's assistant, carrying a scroll bearing an impressive but entirely forged seal. Inspection of gladiatorial quarters, he announced to the guards with bureaucratic indifference. Senator Albinus wishes to ensure proper conditions before the emperor's attendance. The guards, familiar with the frequent inspections that preceded imperial visits, admitted him without question. Once inside, Gaius worked methodically through the complex, marking notes on his tablet, measuring spaces, and generally making himself an unremarkable presence until he reached the secured cells. This one as well, he insisted when the guard hesitated outside Marcus's cell. Inside, Marcus showed no sign of recognition, maintaining the deception as Gaius measured the dimensions and checked the window bars. Only when the guard stepped momentarily away did Gaius murmur, Helena has delayed the trial. 2 days after the games now. And Livia? Still in the carcer, but she'll be brought to the Colosseum as planned. Gaius made another notation on his tablet. Helena has arranged a position for me among the arena attendants. I'll be below the viewing box where they'll keep her. Titus. Drusus is working on it. The Ludus steward owes him a favor. Gaius stepped back, resuming his official demeanor as the guard returned. This cell is below regulation size. Make a note of it. The brief exchange contained everything Marcus needed to know. Their allies were in position, the timing was set, and the critical pieces were moving into place. What remained was the most difficult part, reaching Titus. That opportunity came unexpectedly the following night. A commotion in the gladiator quarters, two fighters arguing over a dice game, drew the guards' attention. In the confusion, Drusus unlocked Marcus's cell and led him quickly through the shadows to a small storage room near the training yard. Titus waited inside, muscular arms crossed, expression hostile. "Make it quick," he growled. "Drusus says you have something to say about the past." Marcus met his former friend's gaze directly. "Tertius lied to you. I never betrayed your escape plan. I saw the transfer order moving you to better quarters the same day I was caught. Because I'd won 3 consecutive matches. The timing was coincidence, nothing more." Marcus stepped closer. "Think, Titus. When have I ever sought comfort or privilege? When have I ever betrayed a brother gladiator?" Doubt flickered in Titus's eyes. Tertius showed me your signature on the report. "A forgery. You know I couldn't write then." It was the crucial detail. Marcus had been illiterate during their early years together, a fact Tertius had overlooked in fabricating his evidence. Titus's posture changed subtly as the realization took hold. 8 years, he said quietly. 8 years I've hated you for this. Tertius played us against each other. And now he plans to profit from our combat. Marcus lowered his voice further. He's placed massive bets against me with the major gambling syndicates. Ledgers in his office prove it. How do you know this? Drusus saw the records. Tertius has leveraged everything he owns on my defeat. Titus absorbed this, his expression darkening. So I'm to be the instrument of his fortune. Unless we turn his plan against him. Outside, the guards had discovered Marcus's empty cell. Shouts echoed across the compound. "We have no time," Drusus hissed from the doorway. "They're searching everywhere." Marcus clasped Titus's forearm in the gladiator grip. "In the arena, we give them a show they'll never forget, but not the one Tertius has planned. Are you with me, brother?" Titus hesitated only a moment before returning the grip. "Tell me what you need." The day before the games, Tertius summoned Marcus to his office again. A large betting ledger lay open on his desk, figures carefully recorded in precise columns. "Tomorrow's combat has generated unprecedented wagers," the Lannister remarked, making no effort to hide the evidence of his own substantial bets. "Your return to the arena after your indisposition has captured Rome's imagination." Marcus said nothing, his face impassive. "You're wondering about your chances," Tertius continued, misinterpreting the silence. "Let me ease your mind. They're precisely 0. He closed the ledger with a satisfied smile. "Titus has been promised his freedom with a victory over you. His motivation couldn't be higher." "And what of the witch?" Marcus asked, changing subjects. "Yes, your healer. She'll have an excellent view of your final moments. Senator Albinus has arranged a special place for her among the officials." Tertius leaned forward. "Consider it my gift to you both, a final shared experience before her execution. You've thought of everything." "I always do." Tertius gestured dismissively. "Prepare yourself as you wish for tomorrow. Pray to whatever gods you barbarians worship. It will make no difference." As guards led him away, Marcus caught a glimpse of the preparations in the Ludus courtyard, his armor being polished, weapons checked. All for show, he knew. The equipment he would receive in the arena would be subtly compromised. A shield strap weakened, perhaps, or a sword blade that would snap at a crucial moment. Back in his cell, Marcus centered himself through the breathing exercises Livia had taught him. Tomorrow would require perfect timing and coordination between multiple people, each playing their part in a dangerous performance where failure meant death. He thought of Livia in her damp cell, enduring with the same quiet strength she'd shown in the Subura. The woman who had healed his body and, without intending to, awakened something in his spirit he'd thought long dead. For her, he would risk everything. The final piece came at midnight, a small package delivered by a kitchen slave, passed through a series of trusted hands. Inside was a vial similar to the one he'd sent Livia, containing the last of her concentrated medicine. With it was a note in Helena's elegant script: "All is prepared. Strength and fortune to you both." Marcus tucked the vial into a hidden fold of his subligulum, where it would remain undetected during the pre-fight inspection. Then he lay down on his pallet and closed his eyes, not to sleep but to mentally rehearse every detail of tomorrow's performance. In the carcer, Livia did the same, preparing for what might be their only chance at freedom, or their final hours together. Dawn broke over Rome with unusual clarity, the sky a pristine blue that promised perfect conditions for the games. The Colosseum stood ready, its massive stone structure already humming with activity as vendors, spectators, and officials began to gather. Today's main event had generated extraordinary interest: the return of the Wolf of the North against the Avenger of Capua. In the underground holding cells beneath the arena, Marcus prepared with methodical calm. He inspected the armor provided, finding exactly what he expected: a subtle weakness in the shield strap, a sword whose tang didn't quite fit the hilt properly. Defects noticeable only to an experienced fighter, designed to appear as unfortunate accidents during combat. Tertius left nothing to chance. Drusus observed quietly as he helped Marcus dress. "He never does," Marcus replied, adjusting the armor to compensate for its flaws. "That's his weakness." The lanista himself appeared as the preparations concluded, his expression smug as he surveyed his fighter. "A historic day, Wolf. Your greatest performance awaits." "Indeed it does," Marcus agreed, meeting Tertius's gaze steadily. Something in Marcus's confidence made Tertius pause. "Remember your place," he warned. "Whatever foolish hopes you harbor, whatever schemes you've concocted, they end today." "We'll see what ends today," Marcus replied. Tertius departed with a final suspicious glance, leaving Marcus with the guards who would escort him to the arena entrance. Above, the Colosseum had filled to capacity, the tiered seating packed with Romans of every class. The wooden awnings had been extended to provide shade for the patrician sections, where Emperor Hadrian himself was expected to attend. In a special box near the imperial viewing area, officials and honored guests gathered. Livia arrived under heavy guard, her wrists bound but her appearance otherwise presentable, Helena's influence ensuring she wasn't brought directly from the filth of the carcer. As she was positioned at the front of the official's box, she caught sight of Gaius among the arena attendants below, his presence confirming that part of their plan remained intact. Senator Albinus approached, Octavius at his side. "The witch healer," he remarked, examining her with detached curiosity. "I expected someone more imposing." "Appearances deceive, Senator," Livia replied quietly. "Indeed they do." He gestured toward the arena. "Your gladiator will discover that truth shortly." Octavius leaned closer. "After today's spectacle, perhaps you'll reconsider sharing your knowledge before your trial. A more comfortable final day might be arranged." Livia offered no response, her attention fixed on the arena floor where attendants were making final preparations. A fanfare of trumpets announced the emperor's arrival. Hadrian entered his box to thunderous applause, acknowledging the crowd with practiced dignity. Behind him came his entourage of advisors, guards, and favorites. "Hadrian himself," Octavius whispered, impressed despite himself. "Tertius has powerful connections indeed." Or Helena does, Livia thought, noting the patrician woman among the emperor's party, a crucial position that would allow her to speak directly to Hadrian if necessary. The preliminary events proceeded quickly, chariot races, animal hunts, and lesser gladiatorial combats serving as appetizers before the main spectacle. The crowd grew increasingly excited as the morning progressed, anticipation building for the featured match. Finally, the moment arrived. The arena was cleared, fresh sand spread to cover the blood from earlier contests. The crowd fell momentarily silent as the announcer stepped forward. "Citizens of Rome, today we witness the return of the undefeated champion of the North, the Wolf, Marcus Severus." The eastern gate opened, and Marcus emerged into the sunlight. The crowd erupted, their reaction a mixture of cheers and jeers, some delighted to see the famous fighter return, others having placed bets against him based on rumors of his weakened condition. Marcus circled slowly, his movements measured but strong, betraying none of the lingering effects of the poison. His eyes scanned the official's box until he located Livia. Their gazes locked briefly across the distance, a silent communication that conveyed everything words could not. And his opponent, the scourge of Capua, the undefeated avenger, Titus Galba. The western gate opened to admit Titus, resplendent in gleaming armor, wielding his signature weapons, trident and net. The crowd roared their approval as he performed a series of impressive maneuvers, demonstrating the skill that had made him famous in Capua's arena. From his private box, Tertius watched with barely contained excitement. Beside him sat several prominent gambling brokers, men who had accepted his enormous wagers against his own fighter, a seeming betrayal that had raised eyebrows but generated irresistible odds. The wolf looked stronger than reported, one broker observed nervously. Appearances, Tertius assured him. Wait until the combat begins in earnest. The referee called both fighters to the center of the arena for final instructions. As Marcus and Titus faced each other, a subtle nod passed between them, imperceptible to the crowd but confirming their understanding. The referee stepped back. A trumpet sounded. The match began. Titus struck first, his trident thrusting with blinding speed toward Marcus's chest. The wolf parried with his shield, moving with the fluid grace that had made him legendary. They circled each other, exchanging preliminary blows, a choreographed dance familiar to arena veterans but thrilling to the spectators. In the official's box, Livia's hands worked subtly at her bonds. Beside her, Octavius watched the combat with clinical detachment. Below, Gaius had positioned himself directly beneath her position, ready to receive the signal only he would recognize. Emperor Hadrian leaned forward, genuinely interested in the contest between two of the empire's most celebrated fighters. "The wolf moves well for a man recently ill," he remarked to no one in particular. Helena, positioned strategically nearby, replied smoothly, "Your Majesty has a discerning eye for true combat skill." In the arena, the first phase of their plan was unfolding precisely as arranged. All that remained was the most dangerous part, the moment when everything would either align perfectly or collapse into disaster. The combat intensified, sword clashing against trident with increasing ferocity. Marcus and Titus moved across the arena in a deadly dance, each blow carefully calculated to appear genuine while causing minimal actual damage. To the crowd, it was a spectacular display of skill and aggression. To the fighters, it was a precisely timed performance. "The wolf fights well despite his recent illness," Hadrian observed, clearly impressed. "Indeed, Caesar," Helena replied. "Some say he was poisoned, not ill." "Poisoned?" The emperor's interest sharpened. "Elaborate, Lady Helena." In the official's box, Livia had managed to work one hand free from her bonds, keeping the loosened rope concealed beneath her tunic sleeve. She caught Gaius's signal from below. Everything was in position. Now they waited for the crucial moment. On the arena sand, Marcus allowed Titus's net to partially entangle his shield arm, a calculated risk that looked like a serious mistake to the spectators. The crowd gasped as Titus pressed his advantage, driving Marcus back toward the arena wall. In his box, Tertius leaned forward eagerly. "Now it begins," he murmured to his gambling companions. The wolf's strength fails him. Marcus stumbled, seemingly weakened, as Titus drove the shaft of his trident against the gladiator's chest. He fell heavily to one knee, shield arm pinned by the net. The crowd roared, half in disappointment, half in bloodthirsty anticipation. "Finish him!" Tertius shouted, unable to contain himself. Titus raised his trident for the final blow, positioning himself precisely as planned. His eyes met Marcus's in silent confirmation. Then everything happened at once. Marcus threw a handful of arena sand into the air, not at Titus's eyes as might be expected, but upward in a cloud that momentarily drew every gaze. In that instant of distraction, he pulled the vial from his subligulum, crushed it in his palm, and smeared the contents on a shallow cut on his arm. Simultaneously, Livia stood in the official's box, her free hand clutching Helena's golden pin, smuggled to her by Gaius. "The wolf is poisoned," she shouted with such authority that heads turned throughout the nearby sections. "Tertius has poisoned his own fighter." The emperor himself looked toward her, then to the arena where Marcus had begun convulsing with apparent poison symptoms. A masterful performance enhanced by the harmless but vivid compounds in Livia's mixture that created the appearance of foaming blood at his mouth. "Stop the match," Helena called, rising beside the emperor. "Great Caesar, this contest is corrupted." Hadrian raised his hand, and the referee immediately signaled a pause. The crowd's excitement transformed into confused murmuring as Marcus continued his convincing display of poisoning. "What is this?" Hadrian demanded, looking toward Tertius's box. The lanista had gone pale, realizing too late that events had spiraled beyond his control. "A trick, Caesar. The witch has enchanted him from afar." "I am a healer, not a witch," Livia called out, her voice carrying with surprising strength. "And I can prove the poison is real. Allow me to treat him." "Absurd," Octavius protested. "This woman is a criminal awaiting trial for practicing magic." Hadrian, intrigued by the unexpected drama unfolding before him, made a swift decision. "Let the healer demonstrate her skills. The gladiator is truly poisoned. We shall see the truth of it." Guards escorted Livia down to the arena floor where Marcus lay seemingly near death, his body rigid, eyes rolled back. She knelt beside him, maintaining their deception flawlessly. "The symptoms match those of eastern viper venom," she announced loudly enough for the emperor to hear. "Mixed with hemlock to slow the heart. Can you save him?" Hadrian called down. "With proper ingredients, yes." Livia looked directly at the imperial box. "But I require my medicines, confiscated when I was arrested on false charges." Hadrian's gaze shifted to Octavius, who squirmed under the imperial scrutiny. "You claim she is a poisoner, yet she offers to heal. Curious." To a Praetorian, he commanded, "Bring her medicines. Let us witness this healing art for ourselves." In the arena, Titus had stepped back, maintaining his role as the honorable opponent unwilling to strike a poisoned man. He caught Marcus's eye briefly, a silent message passing between them. Their gambit was working, but the most dangerous moment still lay ahead. Tertius, seeing his carefully arranged spectacle collapsing, made a desperate move. He rushed from his box down toward the arena floor, shouting, "The witch conspires with the gladiators. This is a performance to cheat honest wagering." Gaius, positioned perfectly, intercepted him at the arena entrance. "The lanista has a betting ledger in his quarters," he informed the guards loudly. "Enormous sums placed against his own fighter. Most unusual, wouldn't you say?" The guards, already alert due to the emperor's interest, immediately detained Tertius for questioning. When Livia's confiscated medicines arrived, she made a show of selecting specific ingredients, mixing them with practiced hands while explaining each step to the now captivated audience. The Colosseum had fallen almost silent, the scheduled blood sport transformed into an unexpected demonstration of healing arts. "The antidote requires both skill and knowledge," she explained, her voice carrying to the imperial box. "The same knowledge that certain physicians would steal rather than earn." Octavius blanched as the emperor's questioning gaze turned to him. Livia administered her antidote to Marcus, actually a mixture that would neutralize the effects of the previous preparation, allowing him to recover convincingly. Within moments, his convulsions began to subside. His breathing steadied. His eyes opened. The crowd erupted in astonished cheers as Marcus slowly sat up, then rose to his feet. It was a resurrection more dramatic than any death they had come to witness. Hadrian, thoroughly entertained by the unexpected spectacle, stood and addressed the arena. "It seems we have witnessed not just combat today, but a conspiracy unmasked and a life saved through extraordinary skill." He gestured for Livia and Marcus to approach the imperial box. As they stood before the Emperor of Rome, Marcus supporting Livia, who appeared exhausted from her healing efforts, they maintained the perfect image of the wounded warrior and his healer savior. "A most unusual interruption to our games," Hadrian remarked, studying them both with intelligent eyes. "But perhaps more illuminating than the scheduled combat." Hadrian studied the pair before him with the calculating gaze of a man who had built his reign on astute judgment of character. The Colosseum remained unusually quiet, thousands of spectators leaning forward to catch the emperor's words. Tertius claims you conspired to disrupt the games and invalidate wagers, Hadrian said. Octavius insists you practice harmful foreign magic. Yet I see a gladiator standing before me who moments ago appeared at death's door, and a healer whose skills seem remarkably effective. Livia bowed her head respectfully. I practice healing arts learned from my Greek grandmother, Caesar. Knowledge passed through generations. And these arts are not taught in Roman medical schools? They reject such knowledge as foreign superstition, preferring their own methods even when they fail. Hadrian nodded thoughtfully. I am reminded of a story from Hispania. A wealthy merchant ridiculed a former soldier for purchasing an abandoned mine in the mountains. You're mad to accept those worthless ruins, his friends laughed. Yet the soldier, having observed certain signs others overlooked, discovered the richest gold vein in the province. The emperor's gaze shifted between Livia and Marcus. Sometimes value exists where others see only ruin. Sometimes wisdom comes from unexpected sources. He gestured toward Tertius, now held firmly by Praetorian guards. Bring the Lanista's betting records. And summon that physician, Avius, back to my presence. While attendants rushed to comply, Hadrian addressed the crowd. Citizens of Rome, today's games have revealed more than skilled combat. They have uncovered corruption that undermines the integrity of our beloved spectacles. The crowd roared their disapproval of such corruption, their allegiance shifting with remarkable speed now that the emperor had indicated his position. Your Majesty, Marcus spoke for the first time, his voice carrying the natural authority that had commanded respect even as a slave. If I may address the matter of my status. Hadrian nodded permission. I hold the wooden rudis, granted after my 5th year in the arena. Marcus produced the small wooden sword that symbolized a gladiator's freedom. Yet Tertius has maintained control through threats and manipulation, keeping me in effective slavery despite my earned liberty. Is this true? Hadrian demanded of Tertius. The Lanista's face had gone ashen. The rudis was granted, yes, but he voluntarily remained under contract. Under what conditions? Helena interjected from nearby. Perhaps your Majesty should examine that contract as well. Before Hadrian could respond, the guards arrived with a ledger seized from Tertius's quarters. The imperial secretary quickly reviewed its contents. Caesar, the Lanista placed enormous wagers against his own fighter. Over 20,000 sesterces across multiple brokers. Murmurs of outrage spread through the crowd. Such behavior violated the sacred trust between Lanista and Gladiator, undermining the integrity of the games themselves. Octavius had been located and now stood nervously before the emperor. Your Majesty, I assure you my concerns about the woman's practices were entirely professional. Were they? Hadrian interrupted. Or were you, like our friend Tertius, motivated by personal gain? Lady Helena informs me you've been attempting to extract the healer's formulas while simultaneously denouncing them as dangerous. Octavius withered under the imperial gaze. Caesar, Livia spoke up. I seek only to practice my healing arts freely, to serve those who cannot afford physicians. The Subura district has little access to medical care. Ush. Hadrian considered this, then made his decision with the swift certainty that characterized his rule. The games today have been most instructive, if not in the manner originally intended. He gestured to Tertius. The Lanista has corrupted sacred traditions for personal profit. His assets are forfeit to the imperial treasury, and he shall be banned from gladiatorial management henceforth. To Octavius, the physician shall be investigated for his allegations against the healer. If they prove false, as seems likely, his license to practice medicine in Rome will be revoked. Finally, Hadrian turned to Marcus and Livia. The gladiator known as the Wolf of the North has fairly earned his freedom, which shall be honored in full. No further contracts may bind him to the arena against his will. The crowd cheered this popular decision, particularly as Marcus was a favored fighter. As for the healer, Hadrian continued, I find no evidence of harmful magic, but rather valuable skills poorly understood by conventional practitioners. She shall be permitted to continue her work, provided she documents her methods for the Imperial Archives. A pause, then a final pronouncement. Furthermore, in recognition of the service done today in exposing corruption, I grant both the gladiator and the healer full Roman citizenship, with all rights and privileges thereof. The Colosseum erupted in thunderous approval. For a former slave and a marginalized healer, citizenship represented a transformation of status that few could dream of achieving. As the imperial party prepared to depart, Hadrian added a final, quieter comment meant only for Marcus and Livia. The soldier who purchased the abandoned mine became one of Hispania's wealthiest men, not merely because he found gold, but because he recognized value where others saw only ruin. Remember that lesson. Standing in the arena where Marcus had expected to die, the gladiator and the healer faced each other in stunned disbelief. Their desperate gambit hadn't merely saved their lives, it had transformed them entirely. Titus approached, extending his arm to Marcus in the gladiator's grip. "Well fought, brother. Though not exactly the combat I expected." "A different kind of battle," Marcus agreed, clasping his friend's arm. "But perhaps a more important one." As the games resumed with alternate fighters, Marcus and Livia were escorted from the arena not as prisoners, but as newly recognized citizens of Rome. They had entered the Colosseum with nothing but a dangerous plan and desperate hope. They departed with something neither had possessed before: legitimate freedom and the protection of imperial favor. The aftermath of the games brought changes more dramatic than either Marcus or Livia could have imagined. Imperial favor, once bestowed, transformed their circumstances overnight. Helena's husband, a minor but well-connected senator, provided temporary lodging in his urban villa while more permanent arrangements were made. The emperor was genuinely impressed, Helena explained as she showed them to their quarters, separate but adjoining rooms befitting their unmarried status but acknowledging their connection. Hadrian appreciates both spectacle and competence. "You provided both." "We merely sought survival," Livia replied, still adjusting to their sudden change in fortune. "You achieved considerably more." Helena smiled. Imperial scribes will record today's events. The story of the gladiator and the healer will be told throughout Rome. After Helena departed, Marcus and Livia found themselves truly alone for the first time since their separation. The elegant room with its frescoed walls and marble floors stood in stark contrast to Livia's humble shop in the Subura and Marcus's gladiator cell. "It doesn't seem real," Livia said softly, touching the fine linen tunic Helena had provided to replace her prison garments. Marcus nodded, equally disoriented by their changed circumstances. From condemned to citizens in a single day. They gravitated toward each other naturally, the space between them closing until Livia rested against Marcus's chest, his arms encircling her with careful tenderness, as if she might disappear should he hold too tightly. "I feared I would never see you again," she confessed against his shoulder. "I knew I would," he replied with quiet certainty. "One way or another." That night, they slept peacefully for the first time in weeks, each knowing the other was safe just beyond the connecting door. Morning brought Gaius, accompanied by a small delegation from the Subura. News of their dramatic vindication had spread rapidly through Rome, and the community Livia had served for years had organized to salvage what remained of her shop after Tertius's men had destroyed it. "Not much survived," Gaius reported apologetically. "But we recovered this." He handed Livia her grandmother's herbalism scroll, damaged but largely intact. Her eyes filled with tears as she unrolled it carefully, fingers tracing the familiar Greek letters. "And this," another neighbor added, presenting the wooden wolf Marcus had carved. "We found it beneath the broken shelves." Marcus accepted the carving, noting with irony that it had survived when more valuable items had been stolen or destroyed. "Some things endure," he observed quietly. Later that day, a messenger arrived from the imperial palace with formal documentation of their new status, wooden tablets inscribed with the official record of their citizenship and a decree protecting Livia's right to practice healing arts throughout Rome. With the tablets came an additional message. Emperor Hadrian requested Livia document her Eastern remedies for the imperial archives, particularly those effective against poisons. Such knowledge, the message noted, was valuable to an emperor who traveled extensively through territories where assassination attempts were not uncommon. "It seems you've gained an imperial patient," Marcus remarked. "And patron," Livia added, recognizing the significance. Imperial interest meant protection far more reliable than anything they could have arranged themselves. A week after the games, Helena approached them with a proposal. "My husband owns a small building near the Forum Boreum," she explained. It previously housed a Greek physician who returned to Athens. With some renovation, it would serve well as both residence and healing house. "We couldn't possibly accept such generosity," Livia protested. Helena waved away her objection. "It's an investment, not charity. My husband recognizes the value of association with those in imperial favor. A modest rent would satisfy propriety." Marcus and Livia exchanged glances, communicating silently in the way they had developed during their weeks together. The location was respectable but accessible to common citizens, far better situated than the Subura but not so elegant as to intimidate potential patients. "We accept," Marcus decided, with gratitude. The building exceeded their expectations, 2 stories with a street-level space perfect for Livia's practice and living quarters above. The previous tenant had left shelving suitable for medicines and a small courtyard where healing herbs could be grown. Most importantly, it offered security and legitimacy that the Subura shop never could. As they explored their new home, Marcus paused in the courtyard, gazing up at the slice of sky visible between the surrounding buildings. "A different kind of arena," he observed. "A better one," Livia replied, joining him. "One where healing matters more than harm." That evening, as they shared a simple meal in their new quarters, the strangeness of their circumstances struck them both. Weeks ago, they had been a gladiator with a poisoned wound and a healer living under constant threat. Now they were citizens with imperial favor, a legitimate business, and a future neither had dared imagine. "What will you do?" Livia asked. "Now that the arena no longer claims you?" Marcus considered the question. For 8 years, his identity had been defined by combat, his value measured in victories and the crowd's approval. Freedom offered possibilities both exhilarating and terrifying. "I still remember how to be a guardian," he said finally. "Perhaps that skill serves beyond the Subura as well." The wooden wolf carving sat on a shelf nearby, watching over them as night fell on their first day in their new home, a symbol of protection that had gained new meaning beyond the bloody sands of the Colosseum. 1 year later, the healing house near the Forum Boreum had established itself as an unusual but respected establishment in Rome. Word had spread of the healer who had saved a gladiator from certain death in the arena, and of the former wolf of the north who now stood guard over her practice. Their story had grown with each retelling, becoming something between legend and gossip among Romans of all classes. The reality was both more ordinary and more remarkable than the stories suggested. Livia's practice had flourished, drawing patients from across the social spectrum. Her methods, combining Greek knowledge, Eastern remedies, and practical experience, proved effective where traditional Roman medicine often failed. She charged the wealthy fair market rates while continuing to treat the poor for whatever they could afford, maintaining the ethos that had guided her work in the Subura. Marcus had found his place as well, creating security systems for the building, screening visitors, and occasionally accompanying Livia when she was called to treat patients in less reputable districts. His imposing presence and arena-honed instincts deterred most trouble before it began. More surprisingly, he had developed an unexpected aptitude for the business aspects of their enterprise, negotiating with suppliers, managing finances, and handling the complex social obligations that came with their new status. The strategic thinking that had kept him alive in the arena translated well to navigating Rome's commercial and social hierarchies. "Tertius would be astonished," Livia remarked one evening as Marcus reviewed their quarterly accounts. "His wolf has become a businessman." "His greatest fear," Marcus replied with a rare smile, "a slave who can read ledgers." The reading lessons begun in Livia's shop had continued, Marcus applying himself with the same discipline he had once devoted to combat training. Now he could read not just medical texts but legal documents, correspondence, and even some Greek with Livia's patient guidance. Their personal relationship had evolved alongside their professional one. The bonds forged in crisis had deepened through shared purpose and daily intimacy. They moved together with the unspoken understanding of partners who had faced death side by side, each still watching over the other in their own way. On the anniversary of the fateful games, Marcus presented Livia with a simple iron ring, forged from a gladiator's token he had kept from his arena days, now transformed into a symbol of a different kind of bond. In my homeland, we had no formal marriage ceremonies, he explained as he offered it to her. A man and woman who chose each other exchanged tokens and made promises before their community. That was enough. And what promises would you make? Livia asked, accepting the ring but waiting to place it on her finger. To be your guardian still, Marcus said simply. Not because you need one anymore, but because it is who I am with you. To stand beside you through whatever comes. To build something that neither of us could create alone. Livia slipped the ring onto her finger, its dark metal stark against her skin. In return, I promise to continue healing you, not just your body, but the wounds the arena left that aren't visible. To remember always that day you limped into my shop, when neither of us knew we were finding our future. They sealed these promises privately, but celebrated publicly a week later with a gathering that reflected their unique position in Roman society. Gaius and veterans from the Subura mingled with Helena and her patrician friends. Former gladiators, including Titus who had established a training school with Marcus's backing, shared wine with merchants and craftspeople. Among the guests was a physician named Rufus, once a student of Octavius but now collaborating with Livia on documenting traditional and Eastern healing practices. After Octavius's disgrace and exile from Rome, Rufus had approached Livia cautiously, expecting rejection. Instead, he found a colleague willing to bridge the divide between formal medicine and practical healing arts. A strange gathering, Helena observed, watching the diverse crowd interact with fascination. Not quite proper by patrician standards, but certainly more interesting. We've never fit neatly into Roman categories, Livia acknowledged. Why start now? Their home had become more than just a healing house. The upper floor remained their private sanctuary, but they had gradually expanded to include space for teaching, Livia instructing promising students in her methods, Marcus training a small group of former soldiers in security techniques. What had begun as personal survival had evolved into creating opportunities for others like themselves, those who existed on Rome's margins but possessed valuable skills. As evening fell and the celebration continued around them, Marcus and Livia stood together in the courtyard where they had planted herbs from both Italia and Germania, a living symbol of their merged worlds. Did you ever imagine this? Livia asked, gesturing to the gathering, the thriving practice, their shared life. When you first came seeking healing? Marcus shook his head. I imagined survival, nothing more. He touched the iron ring on her finger. You taught me to expect more than just surviving. And you taught me that protection can be more than just walls and weapons. She leaned against him, comfortable in the strength that had once seemed so intimidating. It can be a shared life. From inside came laughter and the sounds of their unlikely community. The former gladiator and the healer remained for a moment in the peaceful courtyard, savoring the world they had built together from the ruins of their former lives, a sanctuary neither had dared hope for, yet both had helped create. The wooden wolf carving watched over it all from its place of honor near the entrance, no longer a mere talisman but a symbol of their improbable journey from a desperate bargain in the Subura to a partnership that had transformed them both. 5 years after the fateful games that changed their lives, Marcus stood in the doorway of their expanded healing house, watching Livia instruct a group of students. What had begun as a single building had grown to encompass 3 connected structures, a main healing facility, teaching quarters, and their private residence. The courtyard had been enlarged to accommodate more medicinal plants, including rare specimens from provinces throughout the empire. The Wolf of the North was not immediately recognizable in the composed man who now oversaw what had become a notable institution in Rome. The battle scars remained, but the wary tension that had defined him in the arena had mellowed into vigilant confidence. Now approaching 40, Marcus carried himself with the dignity of a respected citizen rather than the controlled aggression of a gladiator. Livia, too, had transformed. No longer the isolated healer of the Subura, she had become an authority whose opinion was sought by physicians throughout Rome. Her compilation of healing methods, commissioned by Emperor Hadrian, had been copied for the libraries in Alexandria and Athens. The accusations of witchcraft had long since given way to acknowledgement of her legitimate skill, particularly after successfully treating several prominent Romans deemed beyond help by conventional physicians. Most remarkably, they had created a family from those society had discarded. 3 children lived with them now, orphans they had formerly adopted under Roman law. The eldest, Marius, had been a street child from the Subura with an infected leg wound that would have killed him without Livia's intervention. The middle child, Julia, was the daughter of a gladiator who had died in the arena, leaving her with no family. The youngest, Theo, had been abandoned as an infant at their doorstep 2 winters ago. "Papa!" Theo called, spotting Marcus and running to him on sturdy 3-year-old legs. "Look what I made." Marcus lifted the boy easily, examining the small clay figure Theo proudly displayed, a crude but recognizable attempt at a wolf. "Very good," he praised. "For the shrine." Theo nodded solemnly. The household shrine, which honored both Roman traditions and Marcus's northern gods, had become a repository for the children's crafts alongside more traditional offerings. Across the courtyard, Marius was carefully grinding herbs under Livia's supervision. At 12, he showed promise as a healer, his street-born wariness transformed into careful observation. Julia, 9 years old and fiercely intelligent, sat nearby transcribing a text from Greek to Latin, already more educated than most Roman girls would ever be. Gaius, now white-haired but still sturdy, supervised the security apprentices in the adjacent building. After years of formal and informal collaboration, he had officially joined their enterprise, bringing with him a network of veterans who found purpose in protecting healers and their vulnerable patients. Former legionaries who had once struggled with injury, poverty, and purposelessness now served as guards and trainers, their military experience repurposed for healing rather than conquest. The afternoon brought a visitor they had not seen in some time. Titus arrived with news from his gladiatorial training school, which had gained renown for its ethical practices, a stark contrast to the exploitation that had characterized Tertius's ludus. "The reforms you proposed to the Senate have been adopted," he informed Marcus over cups of watered wine in the courtyard. "No more private ownership of gladiators. Schools must now be licensed and inspected regularly." "Small steps," Marcus observed, "but important ones." "Your testimony carried weight," Titus replied. "The Wolf of the North speaking against arena abuses, who could argue?" Indeed, Marcus had found an unexpected platform for influence. While he avoided public attention for the most part, on matters concerning gladiatorial reform and the treatment of slaves, he had become a respected voice. His unique perspective, a former slave and arena champion who had become a successful citizen, gave him authority even among patricians who would normally dismiss such concerns. That evening, as the household settled into its nighttime rhythms, Marcus and Livia stood together on the roof terrace of their home. Below them, Rome spread out in all directions, its temples and insulae illuminated by lamps and moonlight. The Colosseum stood in the distance, a massive shadow against the night sky. "Sometimes I still expect to wake up in my cell at the Ludus," Marcus admitted, his arm around Livia's shoulders. "Or you in your shop in the Subura." "Instead, we have all this," she replied, gesturing to encompass not just their home but the life they had built. On the wall of their courtyard, visible from where they stood, was a recently completed mural, a wolf standing guard beside a woman gathering healing herbs. The artist had captured both protective vigilance and gentle purpose, the dual nature of their partnership. Below the mural, children slept safely in their beds. Students and apprentices rested in preparation for tomorrow's lessons. Guards maintained their watchful presence, many of them men who had found renewed purpose through Marcus's guidance. "We've created something that will outlast us," Livia observed, putting words to what they both felt. Marcus nodded, thinking of the children who would carry forward their knowledge and values, the students who would establish their own healing houses throughout the empire, the reforms that would protect future gladiators from the worst abuses he had endured. Not bad, he said with characteristic understatement, for a wounded gladiator and a Subura healer. Livia smiled at the description, accurate but impossibly inadequate to capture all they had become to each other and to those around them. "I need healing, you need a guardian," she quoted their first exchange. "We found much more than we sought," Marcus finished, as the Eternal City continued its nighttime murmur around them. In their sunlit courtyard garden, Marcus and Livia watched their children tending young plants from both Italia and the Germania. Their hands, his battle-scarred, hers herb-stained, intertwined naturally. From, "I need healing, you need a guardian," Livia mused, to this. "To everything," Marcus replied, as their joined fingers told the story words never could.